So let me turn the time over to my very dear friend, Rich Tehrani at Cloud Computing Magazine.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you. You guys hear me all right? Fantastic. An engineer dies and goes to heaven. He gets to heaven, and there's a mix-up, and they say, you're really not supposed to be here. So he turns around, he goes down to hell. And he's down there for a little while, and he's miserable. Hates it down there. And first thing he does is he installs some plumbing, some wiring, some electricity. Of course, he needs Wi-Fi because in hell, of course, internet dating is as big as it is up here on Earth. So he put that in. He got the place really comfortable, and God hears about it, and he really is a little annoyed, and he calls the devil, and he says, hey, what's going on down there? I hear things are getting better. And the devil says, well, we have an engineer. And God says, how'd you get an engineer? And the devil says, that's not important, but I'm not giving him back. And God says, you better give him back, or I'm going to sue. And the devil says, and where are you going to find the lawyer? So thanks all for being here. Thank you, Adaptive Computing, and Jill and the team for inviting me to speak. I speak a lot at conferences, and most of the time I don't have as many engineers in the audience, which means I've been waiting to tell that joke for about 5-10 years. So thank you. Thanks for being here. I'm with the media, which kind of makes me a little bit unusual as a typical speaker at these kinds of conferences. My company puts on trade shows, we publish magazines, we have a website, and so we basically report on news and information and trends. But it puts me in a unique position because I'm able to present on lots of market research that is not just done by my own organization. So what I hope to share with you today is important market research on trends in the cloud across a wide spectrum. But I've got a lot of data, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on each slide. The slides that I think are less important for this audience, I'm going to go through pretty quickly, but you guys are going to be able to download them later if you like, to spend more time on them, or you can ask questions at the end. So with that, here are some forecasts for the cloud computing market. I mean, you can see they're staggeringly large. We are going to see growth rates in this market which are just unbelievable. If you look at this, $150 billion to $241 billion in the course of 7 years. Of course, these are different analysts. But if you go from here to here, I mean, pretty big numbers, tremendous growth rates. Not only that, but you can see that the paid cloud services are going to be doubling in 5 years, and small to medium businesses are going to be tripling their growth rate as well in terms of cloud computing. Now, Amazon's a name that's come up a lot at this conference, and just to give you guys an idea, they're expected to clear $1 billion in cloud services in 2012. Google's enterprise business, likewise, is going to be clearing that hurdle very soon. Now, this slide, to me, is one of the most important in the deck, and the reason is that Salesforce.com is one of the innovators in the space, one of the companies that has really spearheaded cloud for a number of years. But the reality is, for those of you that are familiar with how companies typically do their payroll services, what do they use usually? What's a company they typically use? ADP, exactly. ADP has been providing cloud services to corporations for decades upon decades upon decades. It's just that we don't consider that to be a cloud service, or we didn't in the past. So the point is that cloud now has crossed this chasm of acceptance where we all understand that it's something that we all need to get involved with and something we need to explore, and CFOs feel comfortable signing off budgets that have cloud purchases. In 1995, my company was, one of the areas we focused on was the call center space. And at that time, contact management was a niche within organizations. When Salesforce.com came on the scene, as well as other companies like Siebel within the 95 to 98 timeframe, they popularized the concept of CRM. Once CRM became popularized, budgets were made for CRM systems, and all of a sudden the market took off and became a multi-billion-dollar market. I see the same thing happening with cloud right now. We've been using cloud-based apps. Many of us have been using hosted email for years, but now we feel comfortable signing off. CXOs, meaning the CEOs, the CIOs, the CFOs, all feel comfortable approving budgets for cloud services. So more predictions here. 80% of new commercial enterprise apps will be deployed on cloud platforms. So if that continues, you can see the pace of cloud applications is just going to skyrocket, and more or less we're going to see a larger portion of applications being cloud-based. What could slow the market down? Security. Security is a major challenge that in some cases has been overcome because, as you'll see in future slides, there's not as much of a concern about security as there used to be. Some of the other analysts have lower numbers of people concerned about security, but still, it's a big deal. In fact, the concern about government agencies being able to subpoena information without the knowledge of the corporation is another challenge that many corporations don't think about, but that is one of the drags on the cloud. And as we see stories about security challenges and government subpoenaing information, we may see some pullback in terms of the adoption rates. So we talked about server virtualization yesterday and today, and this is the number that Gartner says is going to be the percentage of workloads virtualized in the next few years, 60%. Speaking of Gartner, this is how they look at the private cloud computing trends over the next few years. Now, if you go to real deployments, we're going to see a 10-time increase in private cloud deployments in 2012. And enterprises are going to have to try to figure out if they are in the right, if they have the right business for private clouds or not, whether they want public clouds, private clouds, or not. Hybrid is another area. As you can see, hybrid is not growing as quickly as it could be. It's a relatively new idea. Obviously, resource pool expansion is something that many companies are dealing with, or using the cloud for, but we'll eventually see more hybrid clouds as time goes on. So this is a little bit more on just what's happening with private clouds and the distinct advantages of virtualization, traditional management vendors expanding down. We've got open source initiatives. Number 4 is kind of interesting. Amazon's got an incredible ecosystem of companies that are working with it in terms of providing apps and providing services on top of the Amazon clouds. And I say clouds because they've got a storage cloud, they've got a compute cloud, they've got a few clouds. So this slide is kind of interesting too because it shows you the different ways of getting a hold of your cloud or to purchase your cloud. You can either go through a carrier, you can go to a vendor. There's also MSPs, managed service providers that are providing cloud services. So there's lots of different ways of purchasing clouds nowadays. So more information about private clouds, enterprises. This is an interesting one because it's a bit of information about how companies shouldn't focus too much on the dollars and cents. They should focus more on how the cloud can benefit them. So this is something you're going to see a little bit more in the following slides as well. And that is that it's not just about saving money with the cloud, it's about how can it make your business more agile. So this slide to me is another interesting one just because it gives you the reasons that most companies decide to move to the cloud. Has anyone ever heard Mark Benioff, the CEO of Salesforce.com, speak at a conference or anywhere else? Okay, a couple of you have. So Mark Benioff will make the point that even if I gave you the software for free for all of your applications, you couldn't afford the hardware, all of the cabling, the room, the power, all the other things that you would need to get that server room going. In other words, the capital expenditures. That is one of the reasons why cloud is growing and why cloud adoption makes sense, because companies are able to shift from their capital expenditure budget to their OpEx budget. And so that's probably the biggest takeaway of this slide. Huge numbers of predictions of jobs to be created in the cloud. I mean, it's just staggering. Just take a look at this. 14 million new jobs in cloud by 2015. I mean, I can't remember an industry since the Industrial Revolution, or maybe the internet, that created so many jobs so quickly. I mean, huge numbers. And these are some of the sectors where the jobs will be created. Communications, banking, manufacturing. I put this slide in here because it just shows you Microsoft making a prediction about just the transformative impact of the cloud and new jobs and skill sets across the globe. I mean, Microsoft is not thought of generally as a cloud vendor. Of course, they're in the cloud, but we think of them as a desktop vendor. So pretty big deal for this kind of quote to come from Susan Hauser. For those of you that are concerned that the U.S. has not enabled China and India to have as many jobs or to grow as many jobs as possible, and maybe we needed to make some more jobs in China and India, this slide is for you. 6.8 million cloud-enabled jobs will be made in China and India between 2011 and 2015. 1.2 million cloud-related jobs will be created in the U.S. and Canada, according to IDC. And this is kind of interesting too, and that is that 62% of worldwide spending in public IT cloud services is in the U.S. Now, some of the slides that I'm going to show you a little bit later on contradict this slide, so just remember that number, 62%. This is another amazing stat. $1.1 trillion of IT innovation by 2015 because of the cloud. I mean, it's just unbelievable. For those of you that remember, one of the differentiators that Walmart brought to the table when it first burst onto the scene and started to steal market share from companies like JCPenney and Sears was that they had a better supply chain, and they used information technology to more effectively ensure that their shelves were stocked with goods. And that meant that customers didn't have to leave and come back, and they had a more satisfied shopping experience, and they purchased more. Likewise with Amazon, I'd argue that they use technology to really, for lack of a better term, kill their competitors. I mean, they really put a lot of their competitors out of business by using technology. So the question is, what is going to happen in the next 5 years with the cloud, and what technologies are going to be enabled by the cloud for another generation of companies to leapfrog today's companies? We'll have to wait and see, but it's going to be very interesting. So you can see that the small to medium businesses have less challenges in terms of moving to the cloud because security is not as big of a challenge for them. But banking and banking sector is a little bit more of a challenge because of security. Some of the other sectors like government, although government's been adopting the cloud, it may not be in as large numbers as the stats say. They may be dabbling in it. But obviously security is an issue for larger organizations, which is why quite often they consider private clouds instead of public clouds. So if you take a look, this is from IDC. It's more on job creation, and it has to do with companies being able to focus on their core competency. So what cloud does for a lot of companies is it really allows them to outsource things that they really don't need to be good at. They don't need to put a data center in their office. They don't need to go and determine what sorts of processors they need inside of their servers. They don't need to deal with VMware. They don't need to deal with any of those issues because that can all be handled by a cloud vendor, and they could just deal with resulting software that runs on the cloud, or they could just deal with the management from their offices without having to deal with the physical infrastructure. So you could see additional revenue streams are coming from the cloud based on an IBM study. So again, cloud is helping companies make more money, become more profitable. Here's another, for those of you that are looking for an opportunity, hey, how can I generate revenue from the cloud? How can I make money? How can I make a living from the cloud? Look at this number, it's staggering. 40% of enterprises will make proof of independent security testing a precondition for using any type of cloud service. That's a really big deal, right? Right now, that's not happening that often. So 40% is a big number, and we're only talking a few years from now. So I talked to you a little bit earlier about some pretty big numbers of cloud adoption in the US compared to the rest of the world. But you can see here that according to this TCS cloud study, Europe is behind us in cloud adoption today. It's 2011. But really, Asia's ahead of us and Latin America's ahead of us, and it looks like the US is only going to be at 34% by 2014. So really, we're lagging, although I'm not sure that this really syncs up with the other charts or the other stats we saw earlier, but it just gives you a flavor of what one analyst is predicting for cloud penetration. And there's a few more charts from the same company. You could see this is broken out a little bit more clearly. And this is companies between $1 billion to $10 billion. And this is the percentage of applications that live in the cloud. 19% going to 33% by 2014. More on just cloud adoption based on company size. You can see here the biggest jump is companies between $500 million and $1 billion. They are going to increase their cloud adoption from 16% to 44%. So it's a pretty big increase. Surprisingly, one of these numbers down here was not such a big jump. I think it was this one. Companies $5 billion to $10 billion, cloud adoption is really not increasing that much, according to this survey. We're only talking about 3%. So a little bit more. More on small businesses also. We're going to see that nearly half of small businesses are citing information access from multiple devices as a leading factor to move to cloud. So if you think about it, mobility, cell phones, tablets, and being able to do work from anywhere you are is a big reason that companies are moving to the cloud. Because once their applications live in the cloud, they can access them from any device. And there's another technology that's on the horizon, which is going to speed this up even more, and that's HTML5. And HTML5 is going to be a really big deal because it's going to allow companies to produce applications, or anyone to produce applications that look like they're native apps. Because HTML5 is really a rich programming language, and it allows websites or I guess web programs to look just like a native program on your phone or on your tablet, which means that you won't necessarily be stuck with app stores. You can go directly to an iPhone, to an Android device, or to any other tablet that you like, or even a laptop. So interestingly, that price and security guarantees are still a big factor here. Now, we learned a little bit earlier that large companies are looking at productivity as another reason to go to the cloud, but price is still a big deal, as is security. This one's kind of interesting to me. Number two, location of data is not important to a lot of companies, most companies, but this is going to change. And the reason this is going to change is because governments are going to increasingly tap into these clouds through subpoenas and other means to get a hold of information. And companies, for example, in Europe, may not feel comfortable having their data living in a data center that's in Silicon Valley, or in Memphis, Tennessee, or in Miami, Florida. So even though cloud is supposed to be this concept where data just lives somewhere and you don't worry about it, we're going to see that that changes over time, because regulations in places like the EU are going to force cloud vendors to keep data in specific continents and or specific countries. So that's something to keep in mind going forward. So this is potentially disputable. Half of U.S. government agencies are in the cloud. I mean, that may mean that they're dabbling in the cloud. I don't think that half of government data is in the cloud. That would be an insane stat at this point. So I have a bunch of slides on SMBs, sorry, which I don't think it's worth focusing on too closely, because I don't think it's too core to this audience, but I'm leaving them in the deck because I think it's important. Some of these slides have really important trends that can be magnified out across other sectors of the market. So when I get to, so I'm going to flip through these kind of quickly. So take a look at this one though. 44% still believe the cloud services are unproven and therefore too risky. So that's a pretty big deal. 56% of small businesses prefer a single source for their information technology and want a mix of applications and infrastructure sources. So perhaps the most interesting slide here in terms of SMB adoption, and I'm pretty sure, although I don't have a slide to back this up, that this is similar for large companies as well. This tells you where the growth in the cloud will be by sector in the small to medium business market. So let's look at this. This is what you would expect to be number one, billing and accounting. Because if you think about it, financial applications, people are using hosted applications like Quicken, QuickBooks, things like that live in the cloud. You've got ADP also with services that are in this genre. Salesforce has been around for a long time doing this, cloud-based services, so 95% is pretty high. E-commerce would make sense. HR, that's pretty high. It's a good number. 54% product design, third-party data, inventory management, and then delivery management. So it just gives you a sense of where things are going, sector by sector. So another really interesting one is companies are, number one, looking to the cloud for saving money, but if you add these up, 47% are going to go to the cloud to be more productive, 40% want to be more flexible, 33% want to be more innovative, 27% want to be more responsive. So in aggregate, although I haven't cross-tabulated these, if only I could find some people that could figure out how to cross-tabulate large amounts of data with high-performance computers. Any volunteers? Maybe we could solve this. But you figure, I mean, you can probably guesstimate that that's about 75% of the people choose one of these options. So that means that even though saving money is the number one option for the cloud, these other numbers in aggregate are big as well. So a typical SMB uses 4 services at this time. Another one, and then large companies also are impacted by this, but not so much because the cost for email goes up and may not make sense for larger organizations. So 14% using cloud email makes sense. Voice communications is another one, online backup. I mean, these are common ones that you would expect for small companies. Here is a slide on what is going to be the group, or who are going to be the winners in cloud growth. So you would imagine Cisco, Citrix, Google, IBM, Microsoft, Salesforce. I might add VMware and a few others, HP and some others up here. But the mobile operators too are getting in the act, and you can see a list of them: AT&T, BT, Deutsche Telekom, Orange, Sprint, Telefonica, and Verizon will also be big players in the cloud going forward. IBM also big player in the space. You can see that they believe that we're going to see more hybrid adoption, public-private operations, and they see that coming down the road. You can see they're headed for $7 billion in cloud revenue by 2015, another staggering number. Big fans of Salesforce.com. We're going to see IBM focusing more on CRM going forward, not just CRM, but they're going to be focusing more on software and applications that are delivered by the cloud going forward. We heard a little bit about what HP is doing in the cloud this morning through that keynote, which was fantastic for those of you that were here at 8:30. But you can see they're not only going to take on Amazon, which you hear about a lot, but they're going to have a broad array of cloud offerings that sync up with their IT offerings. So it's not just cloud, but it's also on-premise, and it's all going to sync up through a common framework. So that's kind of interesting. Dell also is going to be doing similar things. We could expect many hardware vendors doing the same thing. So this is an announcement HP put out yesterday that they've got a 50 petabyte system that supports autonomies, archiving of data, protection, and other cloud-based services. I mean, it's the biggest private cloud that's out there. So I thought it was worth talking about. Now, even though most of you in this room probably can recite what a petabyte is in your sleep, and you probably know these numbers by heart, but it's worth pointing out that 50 petabytes is equal to 665 years of HDTV video, or 1 billion 4-drawer file cabinets with text documents. So pretty large amounts. So with that, this is a slide that talks a little bit about some of the things that TMC does, put together by my marketing team, just to show you the different publications we have on all of technology, not just cloud computing, but communications, information technology as a whole, and pretty much every subset of technology you can imagine. Here's some contact information that you can use to reach me if you need me for any reason after this event. And if I could leave you with one parting thought, it is that I would ask you to please not anthropomorphize computers. They really hate it when you do that. Thank you.